Hi, Mr. Simon. On a normal AP exam, there'd be 4 different types of FRQs, and one of them would ask you to write a class, and you'd have to figure out what member variables and member functions your class would need. This is not a normal year. You're not going to be expected to write an entire class, but we're going to still do 2 class FRQs. You're still going to be expected to write functions that are members of a class, so you're not wasting your time here. You're going to be writing functions that are members of a class, and it's the same type of thing. Though we will skip a couple of FRQs that I plan to do because they use inheritance, and inheritance is not going to be tested this year. But it is an important topic, and if you're inclined and you have time, you're certainly welcome to do those other 2, the meal FRQ and the random string chooser. But the only 2 I want you to work on this week, that I expect you to work on this week, are the AP line and step tracker FRQs. So when you are writing a class, first thing you want to think about is the members, and which of these members are going to be public and which are going to be private. If you have any private member variables, you may need to write get and set functions for them, and you're typically going to need to write at least 1 constructor, maybe more than that. Now, on a typical year, they'd also be checking to see if you know how to use the word extends for inheritance and how to use the word super, but we don't have to worry about this this year, so we're going to skip over those. The good news is on these class definition FRQs, they're going to tell you what you need to do. You just have to read the problem thoroughly. You might have to read between the lines now and then, but really if you follow the instructions, you can do really well. So just want to remind you how get and set functions work. If we have a private variable and we want to provide the ability for other programmers who are working outside of the class to know the value of that variable, we would write a getter. And the getter would return that private member variable. So a getter returns a private member variable, and it has a type that matches it. Now, if we wanted other programmers working outside of the class to be able to change the value of that private member variable, then we'd write a setter. Setters are void functions. They don't return anything. Instead, they typically take an argument that sets that private variable equal to that value. The most common mistake when you're writing an answer to one of these class questions is to forget to label your methods and your variables as public or private. So typically, right, unless you got a reason not to, all your member variables should be private, and all your functions, including your constructor — the constructor is a function that has the same name of a class — should be public. So you want to make sure you label all your members as public or private appropriately. Now, the second most common mistake involves inheritance and private and super, so we're going to skip over that, and we're going to go straight to our first FRQ, the AP line. So you may be tempted to just start writing code, but when you're doing these FRQs, you really want to read carefully all the instructions. And in this case, we really want to look at these samples down here. The AP line class represents a line, and lines have coefficients in front of the x and y, and then they'll have a third value as well. And we use those 3 to specify lines. So 5x plus 4y minus 17 is one line. Negative 25x plus 40 plus 30 is a second different line. And they're different because they have different coefficients there for the x and y and for the third value. Sometimes we call these A, B, and C when we're writing a line in standard form. So down here, if you look really carefully, when we declare a new line, we give it those 3 arguments for A, B, and C. Now this is also going to be a clue how many member variables we're going to need in our AP line class. In addition to the constructor, we're also going to have a getSlope function, and we're going to need to write a isOnLine function. Now these functions are members of the AP line class, so when you call them, and you're outside of the class itself, then you would call them by putting one of these AP lines in front of the call. So the getSlope function is going to give you the slope of a line, and we have a slope equation here that we could use to figure out what the slope is, negative a over b, right? So we can see here that Negative a is negative 5 divided by 40, so the slope of the first line is negative 1.25. Then we have this is_on_line function, and that'll tell us whether a given xy point is on a line. We can see if it's on the line by checking to see if when we substitute it into the equation, we get 0. If we get 0, it's on the line, it satisfies the equation. If we don't get 0, then it's not on line. We don't satisfy the equation. So you're going to need to write a class that represents the AP line, and you're going to need to make some member variables, a 3-argument constructor, a getSlope function, and an is_on_line function. Now the answer, or a answer, for this class is on 87. I'm going to skip over that, and I'm going to go to our next FRQ, which is a step tracker. Again, you want to read the entire problem carefully, and especially look for clues here. Now you can see it tells us right out, your step tracker class is going to need a constructor, and then these functions: add daily steps, active days, average steps. You're probably going to need to make some private variables in there as well, but you might have some leeway. You could probably do this different ways. So anyway, answers are on the slides. As always, let me know if you got any questions, and thanks for watching.